Hello and welcome to Ep.1 of Downbeat, a podcast created by the Gamma chapter of Kappa Kappa Psi here at the University of Washington. My name is Sean Mahoney, and I'm a percussionist from the Alpha Kappa class studying informatics. So our main goal with Downbeat is to take listeners on a journey through the experience of others as it relates to music and life as a brother. Our hope is to meet people from all walks of life in music and to share that with you. Full disclosure on the podcast front, we are doing this online because of the coronavirus situation. And so any quality mishaps that might happen are just a natural part of the accommodations that we have to make for that. And so we hope that you'll understand as you listen to us. So we thought that the best way to introduce this podcast would be to get some reflections from the person that steers our chapter's ship, so to say. Baylor Blair has been a leader from pretty much almost the minute he joined the chapter when he was elected vice president of membership, only 3 months after becoming a full-fledged active, and then transitioning to his current role as president, where his term is nearly coming to an end amongst all of the uncertainty in the world. How you doing, Baylor?
Doing pretty well, all things considered.
Yeah. So I kind of want to start at the beginning, so to speak. How did you get into music when you were younger? When did you really start knowing that music was your thing?
Yeah, so it got going in sixth grade band back when I was a wee little kiddo. And at the very start of the year, our music teacher had us do this like instrument petting zoo type thing.
Yeah.
And trumpet was really the only thing I could make a sound on.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what I went with. So I started on trumpet in sixth grade and just fell in love with it. It was, unlike anything I'd really done before. And I just, was really taken with it. And then
when did you start swapping over to French horn?
Yeah. So I got to middle school the next year. And we had, like 30 trumpet players. And my middle school director's like, hey, you play French horn now. I'm like, all right, awesome.
So your middle school started at 7th grade then?
Yeah.
Interesting. You don't see that very often anymore.
Yeah, I did. When I was doing summer camp counseling this summer, all the Seattle schools are 6th through 8th for middle school. And I don't know, I hadn't seen that before. So, but yeah, it was 7th grade, got started on horn. Really enjoyed that. And then high school, marching band got going. So I went over to mellophone too. And, that's what I'm still keeping up with today with the Husky band.
So you have kind of this aura, at least in KK Psi and Gamma, of being a leader always. Was that always the case for you? Did you find that you were always a leader in high school or anything like that?
In some groups, yeah. I kind of got it in band for sure because I kind of, felt like that was really my sort of place where I could really be myself and sort of express myself.
Right.
And with that, I kind of found, I don't know, I feel like I sort of took to leadership roles as a way to, sort of give back to programs. Right. I got really invested in band. I lived and breathed band in high school. And I wanted to do something to, help make it run smoother, help it, help people do what we needed to do. So I kind of took to leadership for that reason. So I was drum major my senior year of high school, which, didn't entail a whole lot because our marching band didn't really do anything. Sure. But it was still kind of fun. I was kind of reluctant to go for it. I got talked into it by one of our senior drum majors because I was having too much fun just playing mellow. I was content to stick with that. But it was a really powerful experience and really kind of, really helped me feel like leadership was something I could do and help me feel more comfortable with it.
So then let's keep moving forward chronologically. How did you learn about Husky Marching Band? I assume that was your first musical experience, or your collegiate musical experience was Husky Marching Band, right?
Yeah. So my high school was one of the schools that comes and does the Husky Band Day every
Oh
year in
yeah.
the fall. So that's kind of how I found out about Husky Band. I went every year, loved it every year because just the
Hmm.
scale of it was crazy, and
You went every year.
getting to see the Husky Band play was like, it was the coolest. So I
No
probably saw
kidding.
you back when I was in like a
I
senior.
probably, I think my high school, I think went, I know we went once my junior year. After that, I'm not 100% sure, but I mean, it's entirely possible that I
Yeah.
guess we must have when you were a freshman, I was a junior.
Um, so I loved it, coming to see it every year. And I knew that I wanted to do college band in some form.
Hmm.
But I didn't actually go into my senior year of high school thinking I was going to end up at UW.
Oh, really?
I made the decision kind of late. Because I, as I am now, was a little bit indecisive trying to figure out where and what I want to be when I grow up. Um,
Did you have
but
a dream college back then, or?
Not really. And it's gonna sound funny, but I was about halfway through filling out all my housing apps for Boise State when I
No
heard back from
kidding.
UW that I got in. So I was very nearly a Bronco.
No
Um,
way.
so the Vegas Bowl was kind of interesting for that reason, because it's like, there's a possible future out there where I went to Boise State.
I could
So
have
it was
been
cool
there.
to see, kind of what their band does and how that would have turned out. Um,
So walk me through your first year in Husky marching band, or at least the first season. Kind of tell me,
yeah,
what was that like?
it was incredible. I'm thinking about how to even put it to words. So the dude who was the mellophone section leader last year, his name was James,
Yeah.
who I know you know.
Yep.
And I went to high school with James. He was a junior my freshman year.
Hmm.
So last year when he was his senior year was my sophomore year in Husky band, and he was section leader last year. But he was the one who kind of helped me feel better about joining Husky band and auditioning for it and stuff.
Sure.
And
Yeah.
he was the one that really kind of helped me through my first year in band, because I showed up at PSDs, and my high school marching band didn't really do a whole lot, not nearly on the scale of what HMB does.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm sure.
So when I got to PSDs, I had no idea what to expect or what I was doing.
Mhm.
Um, and I just kind of went from there. It was a lot of, pushing myself and having to learn a lot of new things. But, I knew it was something I wanted to do, and I just tried to keep at it and keep positive. And it was really the people I met along the way in my section, especially, that kind of helped me stick with it.
Yeah.
Um, yeah.
So this was the
So
season that where the Huskies ended up at I believe it was the Fiesta Bowl, wasn't it?
yeah,
That was your rookie year. Yeah, that was a season where, if I remember correctly, the Huskies hadn't done as well as, say, the year before, where we had all that incredible success and ended up at the Peach Bowl in
yeah,
top four. But the Huskies still had done pretty well. And so it was very unusual. It didn't feel like the rookies from your year or even the year before had been accustomed to the Huskies losing, for
yeah,
lack of a better term.
exactly.
Do you think that changed or like that sort of tinted your opinion of like football games or anything, when you are so used to, when the expectation is coming in to it that we should win this? Do you think that
It
kind of
did for sure a little bit, because I'm in my third year now, and I hadn't seen a loss at Husky Stadium until this year. And
I didn't even think about that. That's
when it
true.
happened, it sucked. I think it was the Cal game too, when we
Yeah.
were there until like 2 in the morning because we had the lightning
Oh,
delay.
the thunderstorm delay. Was that was the delay because of the thunderstorms, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I remember being in the stands for that one, and I am going to be 100% honest, I did not stay throughout that game.
Yeah.
I left. I just so we're clear, I'm not in the band this year, so I was able to. I'm not in the marching band this year, so I was able to leave. And boy, did I, because I was not
Yeah.
interested in going back to watch the second half at 11:30 in the
Yeah, the rain let up eventually, thankfully. So it was about 2 a.m, and I was trying to walk back to my apartment.
Mhm.
Um, and I was like, this sucks. I want to like bike back. So I tried to unlock a Lime bike, but I guess they like shut down after a certain time of night or something
Do
because they
they
were
really?
all not working. So that sucked because I was like, my shoes were soaked, and I was thinking like, oh man, we lost. That sucks. But even with all that, I'd still had, you know, as fun as it could have been hanging out with everyone kind of huddled under the stadium trying to
Yeah.
stay positive
Mutual
as best we could.
commiseration, perhaps.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Yeah, I get that. So taking again perhaps a different experience. Um let's back up a little bit back to your first year again. You were what was your first taste of being exposed to what Kappa Kappa Psi was? I think I know what the answer is, but I'm curious
Yeah.
to see what how you interpreted it.
So not only did James kind of help me through band in my first year in general, he was also the one that kind of first started talking to me about KK Psi, and told me about the recruitment events. So I went to a couple, went to an info session. I forget what events I went to exactly, but
Hmm.
I thought it was cool. Thought it might be something I wanted to be involved with because I was still in that same mindset from just coming off being drum major at my high school the year before of like, these programs mean a lot to me. So I want to
Right. Yeah.
invest myself however I can.
Yeah, for
Um,
sure.
so that's kind of how I found out, was just hearing about it from other people in my section and just other people I talked to. And going to that info session was really cool because, you could kind of see everybody, how they interacted. Everybody was really friendly with each other. It seemed like they were having a great time, like even just hanging out in the doghouse doing an info session.
For sure.
Seemed
Yeah.
like they were having the time of their life. So I, was thinking like, you know, this seems like a good group of people doing good work and I want to be a part of it.
Yeah. So you and I are part of the same class of the Alpha Kappas, and it occurred to me as you're explaining this to me that our MC year was the only normal recruitment year.
Yeah, you
If you
could
think
say
about
that.
it, because last year was all the snow, the giant snowstorm, and then this year with coronavirus situation. So I hope we can go back to after I'm gone, and hopefully next year we can go back to a time when the norm is normal,
Yeah,
and
no
not
kidding.
everything being delayed, canceled, moved every which way. So tell me kind of about that oddly brief period between becoming an active and going for a leadership role.
Yeah. So we became active end of winter quarter, got back for spring quarter, and I during education I sort of had this moment where for sort of the first half of education I thought KKSI was cool, but I didn't know if it was something I could really throw myself into. And
Mhm.
I don't remember what it was exactly, but I had a moment midway through education where it was like something flipped. And I was like, yes, this is, the group I want to be a part of. These are good people doing good work. And I want to just throw myself into this as much as
Yeah.
possible.
Do you think that it was an issue of time constraints or not feeling like you fit in, or what did you think was originally holding you back?
I think part of it was, I had spent my first season in HMB getting to know people in my section, but I hadn't really branched out a lot beyond that.
Yeah.
Um, and, once band entered winter quarter, I kind of felt like it was back to just me, and my roommate was the only person I saw on a regular basis.
Hmm.
Um, and then showing up to education was nice because I could, interact with people again from band. But I think it was kind of that. But something clicked at a certain point where I just, knew it was something I wanted to be more involved in.
Do you remember exactly what that thing was?
I'm trying to. I don't know if I can off the top of my head.
Because, for example, I remember exactly, I had more or less the same problem where I was like, I don't know if I really want to do this. And I had a different reason because I was a third year at the time. in amongst a group of mostly first years, and I just didn't feel like I fit in. And the thing that really changed my mind, for example, was Rotato, second degree. The
Yeah.
experience of getting to meet all the different people whose lives KK Psi has touched, and seeing the ways in which it brought people together. I remember going into it the morning of thinking, I really don't want to do this. And when I went to sleep that same night, I said to myself, this is what I want to do. I know that this is it. So
Absolutely.
do you happen to remember what it was for you?
Still no, but I remember really enjoying Rotato 2 for the same reason, where,
Mm-hmm.
it was cool to see, honestly, what a family that KK Psi can be.
Yeah.
It was a really just cool experience.
All right. So as we move forward, then we're looking at elections, and you decided one way or another to apply for vice president of membership.
Yeah.
And so I guess what prompted you to go for a leadership role so early in your time? You'd been inactive for 3 months, 2.5 months, and you had known about KK Psi for a grand total of perhaps 8.
Right. um, so once I kind of had my awakening, I guess you could call it,
Mm-hmm.
I knew I wanted to go for leadership at some point, because I think, like I said, servant leadership is something that really means a lot to me.
Yeah.
So I knew I wanted to go for it in some way, but I didn't think it was going to be year one.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so when we opened up nominations for elections, Miranda, who was the president at the time, was the one who nominated me. I didn't know she was going to do that. I was really surprised when she did.
Mm-hmm.
But so I accepted the nomination, not thinking much of it, but I started thinking about it a little more, talking to people, and I realized, you're only going to be in college once, and you're only here for so long.
Mm-hmm.
And if this is something you're passionate about, why not just go for it?
Yeah. So in Husky marching band, there's a cultural thing that happens where younger people, first and sometimes second year members, will audition for section leader roles, not because they want to get it, but because they want the experience. And that's something that is pretty common in Husky marching band across
Mm-hmm.
all sections. Did you treat this run for VPM kind of in the same way? Because if I remember correctly, the competition for VPM that year was pretty formidable. There were at
Yeah.
least 3 or 4 other candidates, all of whom, all of you were super, super qualified for the job. And so I wondered, how did you treat it as you went into it?
So I think it might have started out that way. But as I got, thinking about it a little bit more, I realized that, it genuinely was something I was passionate about doing, and it was something I wanted to go for seriously.
I guess, well, let me rephrase that a little bit, because I have no doubts about your passion for the job. Obviously, it was more of, when you auditioned for it, did you go for it thinking, yes, I have a shot at this, or did you think of it more as I'm going to get the experience so that I have an even better shot going into the future?
I see. I thought getting it year one was kind of a long shot,
Mm-hmm.
which is why I was so surprised when it actually worked out, and very humbled too.
Yeah.
But yeah, I was hopeful, but like you said, it was a lot of other super qualified people in the field too. So I don't know if I went into the election day expecting to come out as VPM.
Mm-hmm. So what was the okay, here's an interesting thing. What was the first 24 hours after getting vice president of membership? What was that like, realizing I now will be in charge in the future, but I am now in charge of bringing in a whole class of
Yeah,
rookies?
it was kind of surreal. Because once I got over the kind of initial point of like, holy crap, I actually did this.
Yeah.
I, kind of, I don't know if I started planning right away, but I started thinking like, you know, this is something I want to commit myself to. What can I do in the next year to make
Mm-hmm.
sure that I can commit myself as fully as possible?
Yeah, for
And
sure.
just trying to kind of get into that mindset.
Yeah, that's really cool. Um, what did you kind of do over the summer after you had been elected? What was your kind of game plan going into the year? Because
Yeah.
VPM is a position where you have to hit the ground running
Yeah.
once the school year starts.
So I started out kind of reading through the Road to Wisdom handbook that they give all the VPMs. Well, it's online now, but back in my day, it was like an actual handbook
Yeah.
that I inherited from the old VPM. So I took some time to read through that, kind of familiarize myself with it, make sure I knew, how all the little pieces fit together. And then about August, I started talking to our curriculum advisor, we had a person from Nationals who was assigned to us and a couple other chapters to kind of work with our VPM and help with any questions about recruitment and education, stuff like that. So started bouncing some questions off of him. And then in August every year, we have our leadership retreat.
Yeah.
It's the Husky Band's leadership retreat, but Dr. McDavid invites KK Psi every year.
Right.
And at that, I started working with Michelle, who was president last year, to kind of bounce the sort of draft recruitment calendar I had off of her, make some tweaks, see what she was thinking about it. So that's kind of what summer looked like, was really just sort of getting an idea of what is the next year going to look like.
Yeah. So as we're kind of thinking about that leadership team that year, of the 8 positions, only 3 were not in our class. Only 3 were not brand new actives, so to speak. Do you think, how did you treat that? Do you think that was something that was a good thing or a bad thing, a mix of both? How did you view that in reflection?
I think it brought a lot of really cool perspective to the table. Because we, being pretty new to the chapter, we, didn't have time to get sort of into a mindset of how things had always been done. We just had fresh ideas.
Yeah.
But then we also had, people like Michelle and Oliver and Patrick who were there, who had been around the chapter for a few years already. And they could bring the perspective of, here's what we have done before, here's what's worked well, here's what hasn't. And it was very useful to kind of have both ends of the scale, where we could look at, here's these new things we want to try out, but based on what we've done before, here's how we can sort of make it into something workable and make the goals achievable.
For sure. Looking over the entire year, what do you think took you the most by surprise? Like, what really surprised you as you were going about the business of being vice president membership?
I think it was just, how much the VPM is involved in that I didn't really see before as just an MC and then as just a newly active. Like, I didn't know how involved the VPM was with ritual planning. I didn't know about, reaching out to directors of different ensembles and talking to them, or talking with people at the national level, seeing what we needed to do there. So just a lot of the sort of different lines of communication the VPM is involved in, I guess, was kind of the most surprising thing for me.
Yeah, I believe that. So how did you personally get through a year that was unusually stressful? I think more stressful than most. What kind of kept you grounded?
It was honestly the people in the chapter who I'd spent the last year really getting to make connections with. There were a lot of times where I got kind of stressed out because, oh no, we have another snow day. How is this going to mess with education? What do I have to move around? How is this going to impact the schedule on the road? But there were always people along the way I could turn to, people in the chapter to make me feel like I wasn't having to go through this on my own. And that there was, people who could help me through it or take on different parts of the responsibility. And that was, a lot of what helped me through it. The other part I'd say is, getting to know the Alpha Lambdas over the course of winter quarter last year. they really, kept me energized and kept me going.
Yeah.
It was an absolute blast to get to know them all and get to work with them during education. It's been really cool to see how their first year as actives has been going.
Hmm.
So they too really helped me kind of stay in it and keep going, even with all the crazy stuff we had to deal with.
Yeah. So for those of you who don't know, last year we had one of the craziest snowstorms probably that most people have ever seen. If you're native of Seattle, where we
Yeah.
had, I think, upwards of 8 or 9 days of either cancellations or delays,
Yeah,
and in a quarter that is only 10 weeks long, that is a huge dent. That's
it
almost
was
20% of
crazy.
the quarter. And there were all sorts of adjustments that had to be made. It was an absolute mess. I don't envy you guys. I don't envy Jillian, who was the director of ceremonies at the time.
God, we
It
had
was,
to
yeah.
reschedule second, third degree so many times last
Mhm.
winter. It was a nightmare.
Yeah. On the topic of the Alpha Lambdas, that the Alpha Lambdas are a class that is the largest out of all of us. If I remember correctly, we extended bids to 34
Yeah, I think
MCs, if I remember
34.
correctly. And that 34 is a huge number. That's probably more than a lot of people's entire chapters.
Yeah.
So, kind of, how did you navigate having to basically be a teacher of a full-sized class, full-sized in the context of perhaps maybe a high school, not
Yeah.
college, but you know.
Um, I think communication was probably the biggest thing. Not just in terms of, hey, we're a huge group. How are we all going to find time that works for everybody to meet? But also in terms of, you know, kind of seeing what people needed and figuring out how I could react to those needs, in
Yeah.
terms of, what do we need to take this big group and make it feel as small and as close as possible. So communication, probably the biggest thing. And then again, we had, a lot of actives that showed up to education to sort of help me and help the MCs at the time feel sort of more acquainted with the chapter. So people helping me through it too was a huge benefit.
Yeah. And so let's fast forward even a little bit more then. So we're looking at now elections for the next year, and you have put through a class of very talented MCs in the Alpha Lambda class, a large, very large class at that. And so now you're kind of considering what's next for Baylor. Kind of, how did you go through that process, and what made you eventually land on I want to be president?
Yeah. Um, so going into like April last year, I knew I wanted to keep going in leadership somehow, to keep giving back and keep working for the chapter. Um, but I kind of felt like I wanted to turn the dial down a couple notches after what, as you said, had been a pretty crazy year.
Turn the dial
Um,
down, so you went for president?
yeah, so going into sort of April and May, I had my heart set on going for DPME
Oh,
because I thought it would be a way to, still be, you know, sort of helping the inner workings of the chapter run smoothly and still be in sort of like a peer mentor role, but maybe not shouldering as much of the burden.
yeah, for sure.
Um, and I sort of pitched this idea to Michelle, who was the president at the time.
Hmm.
Um, and she was the one who really talked me into like, I know you want to take a step back, but what if you did the opposite of
What
that?
if you did the polar opposite of what you're
Yeah.
trying to do? Yeah.
Um, so I was pretty hesitant at first.
Hmm.
I didn't know, not only if it was something I was kind of in a space where I'd be ready for it, but I also didn't know, if I was qualified for it because, up to that point and in my experience, uh, it was really only seniors who had served as president just because
Hmm.
they had that level of experience in the chapter. And that's a case in a lot of other chapters as well. Um, so I wasn't really sure I was the right person for the job at that point. Um, but I was kind of interested. So I talked to Michelle a lot about it. And there was at WDC last year down in Tempe.
Right.
It was like after the closing session on Friday or something, her and I went and got lunch, like real quick in between two things we were doing. And I spent basically the whole time just talking to her about, like, you know, what does the president do? You know, what does it look like in terms of being a student?
Mm-hmm.
Is it, you know, something you think I'm ready for? You know, here's what my goals would be, stuff like that. And really just kind of talked her ear off about it. And she was really patient with me, really receptive to what I had to say. And I think that is really what made me feel like, you know, this is something I can do. This is something I want to go for.
So walk us through, because it's been a while and truthfully, I don't remember. Walk us through what your platform was for president. What was your goal when you were pitching the idea to the rest of the chapter?
So I've kind of been thinking back about it as we're, you know, coming to the close of the year. And I think I had sort of three goals going into it. Number one was increasing communication between leadership and the chapter.
Okay.
Making sure that, you know, the decisions that leadership made were truly reflective of what the chapter wants.
Yeah.
And I think to that end, Slack has been helping a whole lot.
Yeah. We can cover whether or not those reflect how those reflections or how those goals turned out a little bit later. But I'm curious, just generally, what was your
so it was that. I also, in sort of that same vein, wanted to hold a chapter retreat. To sort of plan out a sort of set of goals for the next year, next 2 years down the road.
And this was separate from the leadership retreat.
Right. Sort of just a Gamma only retreat to figure out where we are right now and take a look at where we want to be in the next year and how we want to get there.
And this was open to everybody in the chapter, unlike the leadership retreat.
Exactly.
Right. Yeah.
And then the other thing I wanted to do going into the year, this was kind of my moonshot goal, was start the process of colonizing more KK Psi chapters in the West.
Oh, yeah. We only have how many?
16 KK Psi and then 8 TBS. The West is very tiny.
Yeah, that's really, really small. And I mean, take Washington State, for example. There's only 2.
Yeah.
And then, you know, it gets to the point where if we want to do a state's event, we kind of have to bring Oregon into it just to make sure that it's not just, you know, us and Iota Gamma.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So what was elections like? I remember at least that elections was pretty sparse in terms of people running for positions. Did you go into it thinking that, like, what was your headspace thing like going into it?
Sort of, if I was optimistic, but without any sense of anything really coming from it going into VPM the year before, I went into elections for president really thinking like, you know, this is something I very seriously want to do. And I'm going to work to, you know, try to show people my vision and see if it's something they want to, you know, see implemented for the chapter. So I was, you know, trying to be more deliberate and more thoughtful, I guess, than I'd been the year before.
Yeah. And I think by and large, the chapter seems to, or did then agreed with what your vision. And so you were elected president. And so kind of going back a little bit before you had, before even you had been elected president, burnout in leadership is something that is pretty common, not even just in KK Psi, but just as a concept in general. Burnout is a huge deal.
Yeah.
So how did you go from, you know, a very stressful year in a position where the snow apocalypse, if you will, affected your job disproportionately more than everyone else in the leadership team? What then made you say, you know what, I haven't had enough of this, I want more?
Yeah.
So how did you deal with the burnout?
I think it honestly kind of came from sort of remembering that stressful spot we were in, where, you know, thinking back to, you know, how crazy that was and how much work Michelle had to put in to sort of steer the ship through all that.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, sort of thinking about like every year presents its own set of challenges, and there needs to be someone sort of in the leadership team who, you know, has seen stuff like this before and knows how to sort of get the chapter through rocky patches.
Yeah.
And I felt like after the crazy year we had, I, you know, felt like I was in a spot where, you know, this is how I'm going to give back to the chapter. I want to, you know, make sure we stay on our feet for another year.
Well, we didn't think. I think we all thought that the world wouldn't one up a snowpocalypse, and
Dude,
lo and behold,
I would take Snowpocalypse over this.
I completely agree. So let's then think about your time as president so far. What kind of is the main difference in, not necessarily in terms of necessarily specific responsibilities, but what's the mindset of being a VPM versus being a president like? How is that different?
I think it's the biggest difference is probably the kind of work you do, not necessarily the amount, but sort of how it's structured, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So a lot of what the VPM does is sort of very project oriented, where, you know, we're planning recruitment and now recruitment's happening, and then there's kind of a break for a little bit. And now we have to plan education, and there's a lot of work going into that, and then education's happening, and then it's over and we're kind of, you know, taking a step back again.
Yeah.
So it's a lot of work for a while and then nothing for a little while.
So more concentrated work, perhaps.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But with president, it's sort of a little bit every day. You know, there's little things here and there that you need to be aware of and need to be taken care of. And there's big things here and there, like, you know, national reports and paperwork you have to do,
Right,
or
for sure.
things that the chapter's going through, or UW's online now. How are we going to deal with that? And you sort of always need to be in a mindset of, or ready to go into a mindset of, you know, jumping into KK mode and sort of getting ready to hit the ground with that.
So let's give a bit of context to those who might not know. Let's think about it this way. How often do you get messages, or how often are you having to deal with stuff? Like how often is someone messaging you on Slack saying something that was like it's like, hey, I need to talk to the president about this? Like, how often do you find yourself fielding questions, making decisions, stuff like that, to give a sense of scale?
Yeah, couple times a week maybe, but it's not usually, you know, like I'm putting out a fire or something. A lot of the time it's just, you know, hey, I sent this email to the EC. Did you guys get it yet? Or, you know, I don't know how this thing procedurally works. What should I do? Yeah. Or I have a question for someone. Who should I ask it to? Or stuff like that. So it's usually kind of little things like that.
How when people reach out to you, what is the percentage of they're reaching out to, they want to talk to Baylor or they want to talk to the president? Do you find that there is even that split? Because for me, for example, I find that I get a pretty even split, actually, of people asking Sean for something versus people asking for the webmaster. I don't know if I made that clear. Yeah, I'm the webmaster of our chapter here. But how much of that split do you think it is?
I don't know. That's a good question. I guess it's kind of hard to say, because I guess for me personally, I try to, you know, when you're in sort of a student leadership position, the balance of I want to be everybody's friend to I need to get work done is kind of a difficult line to walk, and I have trouble with it oftentimes. So I guess it's kind of hard to say what
definitively.
Yeah, exactly, what the difference is.
Yeah. You've opened a very interesting can of worms of, and this is something that is true across all student leadership positions, that striking that balance of, I need to get stuff done, but I also want to be people's friends, because at the end of the day, we are students. We're all here for each other, and especially in a fraternity where brotherhood is emphasized so much.
For sure.
What has been, how has been your experience of balancing that act of I am president, but I am also your friend?
I think it's, again, communication has been such a huge thing. And I think it's, my leadership style, I really try to be, I try to avoid top-down decisions as much as possible,
Mm-hmm.
because the decisions that the leadership team makes aren't just going to affect us. They're going to, impact what the whole chapter does.
Yeah.
So I really try to make an effort to be as communicative and as collaborative as I can be, to make sure that everybody is getting a say in what's going on. So I think that's how I sort of try to walk that line,
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
is, just talking to people, figuring out what they need, figuring out what they want to see, and just sort of, going from there.
Yeah. One thing that I think a lot of people are always interested to hear about is, what is it like working more closely with Dr. McDavid more than most? Because I think the the students that talk with Dr. McDavid the most probably are the drum majors, the undergrad assistant, and the president of KKSI. I think those are the top three
Yeah.
groups. And so, for many, especially like as a rookie, people look up to Dr. McDavid, rightfully so. The work he does on behalf of both KKSI and Husky Marching Band is incredible. And so, what is it like kind of to work with him in a more, maybe not collaborative setting, but on a more consistent basis,
Yeah.
where, a rookie or someone who is just a regular member of the band, if you're having to talk to Dr. McDavid in a one-on-one meeting, it's probably not a good thing.
Yeah.
But this is something that is the norm for you. So I'm curious, what's that like?
It's definitely been given me some new perspective,
Mm-hmm.
in terms of, what he does for the chapter, and sort of just the perspective he has, honestly, because he's been around KKSI forever.
Mm-hmm.
He was an active, like, at Ohio State.
He's a district governor, if I remember correctly,
Yeah,
right?
district governor when he got out here. Has been our chapter sponsor, like, since we were rechartered back in the
Mm-hmm.
90s. So, he's been everywhere and done everything with KKSI. He's, a really good source of advice and of just knowledge about the fraternity. And it's been really fascinating to work with him and sort of have him give me that perspective that I can then take, and relay to the chapter on whatever it is that we're working on.
Yeah.
And I think the other part of it is, him having, sort of that wealth of experience, and him being in the position that he has at UW.
Yeah.
It gives us as Gamma access to, not just, knowledge, but access to a lot of resources that other schools and other chapters don't always have.
Yeah.
And that's something that's really given me pause this year, of just, we are in a really fortunate position here, and it's, honestly, we're better for it. So
Yeah.
it's been a really cool experience to get to work with him more closely.
I agree. I definitely agree with that. I think there can be times where we as a chapter can sometimes take for granted the amount of influence that Dr. McDavid has on just our ability to exist. You take examples like being able to do degrees in Husky Stadium.
Right.
What college, generally speaking, can have their degrees in a multi-million-dollar stadium
It's
at no
crazy.
cost to the organization? That's the thing that I think that blows my mind the most, is just the amount of resources that we get as part of having Dr. McDavid as our sponsor.
For sure.
Yeah. So I guess I want to take now kind of a holistic look at your time at Gamma. And I guess I want to start off with, like, do you have any sort of regrets, things that you wish you had done differently as you reflect? Because you're almost done. You're almost done with your time as president, and you've expressed that you're not going to be going for a leadership position next year. And so as you look back on the last 2 years of your leadership, what do you think if you could go back and change something, what do you think you would have done differently?
Yeah, I think I would have tried to do a more, I guess, deliberate job of making sure that we set time aside for the chapter to do some goal setting and reflection.
Yeah.
To, have that conversation about some strategic goal setting, and not just setting goals, but figuring out concretely, like, here's what we want to do, here's what we want to be, what steps are we going to take to achieve that?
Yeah.
I really wanted to try to work that in this year, but there is just not enough time, in the school year. It goes by so fast. And so if I could do it all again, that would be something I'd probably do differently. The other thing I guess I kind of regret, and this is, in no way in my control, it just kind of bums me out, is we had like 12 or 13 people that were going to go to WDC this last year, which is the biggest showing at a district or a national event we would have had in a long time. And I'm just kind of bummed that people didn't get that experience.
Yeah, I'm with you.
Traveling to stuff like WDC has, it's been some of the most impactful experiences that I've had since I've been in KKSI. And I'm bummed that, we couldn't all share that experience this year. But I'm hoping that, we'll be back next year ready to do it again. And if we bring WDC to Seattle, then, that would just be the icing on the cake, honestly.
Is that confirmed, or was the decision to host WDC for 2021, was that pushed off until this whole situation gets resolved, or what was the
kind of
on that?
So how it's been explained to me is that right now the national fraternity is working on revising the way that we solicit bids for WDC, looking at kind of retooling the bidding process, seeing if there's things that we can be doing differently. So we submitted our bid, and we were kind of told, like, thank you for sending this in, just kind of hang tight, because we haven't forgotten about you guys, but we can't really do a whole lot just yet because these decisions are being made sort of above our level.
Yeah, for sure.
But our bid is still out there, and as soon as they get the new framework for bids figured out, I'm ready to just send it right off again and be like, here we are.
So we're gonna have to send a second bid. Will our first bid count, or does it look like we'll have to send a second one?
Stay tuned. I'm still trying to figure that one out too.
Yeah, I'm sure that the amount of decisions regarding next year are kind of on the back burner while we try and figure out what's going on right now.
Yeah, no kidding.
So we'll do the opposite of that, and we'll talk about next year. So you've said that you're not going to be going for a leadership position next year. What's the plan for Baylor next year? Going from being, for lack of a better term, top dog, to just being a regular member like everyone else. How do you plan to set aside because you have a natural inclination to help where you can, to say, I can help with this. How do you plan to take that balance? Because it could be very easy. I could see it being very easy for someone with your mindset to say, I can help you, the future president, with stuff, and then being overwhelmed by being a second president, for lack of a better term. What's your game plan for next year?
Definitely just trying to be the most active I can be.
Mm-hmm.
And really, kind of making the most of my last year in the chapter. I want to be there for whoever the next president next year is, but whoever they are, I fully trust them to, take the helm next year, get us through. Hopefully no challenges will come up next year, but inevitably something always does.
Yeah.
But, whoever it is, just be there if they have any questions. But other than that, really just enjoy the experience of being an active while I still can.
Yeah.
And just really try to take all the opportunities I can.
Yeah, that's super important. So I don't really have that much else that I wanted to ask you. I was curious if there's anything that you wanted to talk about, or anything that you felt didn't get really covered during our talk.
No, this was cool.
Yeah.
This is a really awesome project, and I'm, really honored that I get to ring in the Downbeat.
Yeah. we'll see where it goes from there. Well, thank you so much
Yeah,
for taking the
absolutely.
time to share your insights with us, man. I really, really appreciate your willingness to work with me through this.
Yeah, absolutely. And
Yeah.
thanks again, dude. This was really an amazing opportunity.
Yeah. So that's going to wrap us up for our first episode of Downbeat. We don't really have a regular schedule for release at the current moment, but we're really, really excited to get more content out to you. Make sure to follow us on Instagram, Snapchat, Twitter, the likes. It's all of it is in the bottom right of your screen right there. It's at KKY Gamma. And we'll see you next time on Downbeat.